We are talking about rod ends. The reason we're doing that is because it's Tech Tuesday, and it's pretty technical when you start getting into how rod ends are made, what they're made from, and what good and bad is. And we're going to talk about all of that with you guys. But at the moment, Chase is showing you, like we said, our newest employee. There's a couple of things that are super important when it comes to rod ends. One, the size of the rod end. Two, what they're made of and how they're manufactured when it comes to, say, like heat treating and alloys, things like that. A lot of guys call them Heim joints. Heim joints, that is like saying Volkswagen, Chevy, Dodge, any of the manufacturers. Heim was the biggest company at the time before World War II that was manufacturing rod ends. Rod end, it would be like saying automobile. A rod end is a car, and Volkswagen builds that car. Well, Heim was making rod ends. So the right term, and I don't mean to be like picky, but Heim joint is kind of old and it's a little bit on the not correct side. Rod end is correct. So now that we got Heim joint rod end terminology out of the way, you've got a whole bunch of other things you can talk about too. You've got male rod ends, male, female, male into female.
Oh my God.
I know, now everybody's getting excited. But we do use some female rod ends around here depending on the product, of course. Size of rod end is going to be probably one of the most critical factors, because the larger that the rod end gets, the stronger it is, the higher the rating, the longer it will last. And when you say how long will they last, well, that's like saying how long do my brakes last? Because if you lay on the brakes all the time, you're gonna waste them in 10,000 miles. I mean, like drivable car, right? Instead of 50 or 80,000 miles. With a rod end, it's the same thing. It's a wearable part. They're designed to wear out. They do not last forever. And if you are hard on it, let's say a race car, then you're gonna wear the rod end out a lot quicker. If you're really easy on the car, then you may not ever wear them out if they're higher quality. So size is definitely important. It may not be everything, like she said, but size is definitely a big thing. In everyday use, typically rod ends are the same size hole as they are the threaded shaft. So here is a 5/8, half inch, 5/8, 5/8 hole, 5/8 shaft, and here is a low quality 3/4, and here is a high quality 3/4 inch, and this is a 7/8. You can see they get pretty much exponentially larger, and if I had a 1-inch rod end on here, it'd be about this big. And if you get into trophy trucks and class 1s, you'll see 1.25 inch, 1.5 rod ends on those that are about this big around. And the reason is they're heavier, more horsepower, bigger abuse, requires bigger rod end to hold it together and not fail. Absolutely there is a failure point for rod ends. Actually, they are rated according to, well, all of them are stress tested by the manufacturers. And depending on what they're made of, if they're mild steel or they're a high carbon steel, or they are a stainless alloy like 17-4 heat treated, all of which have different break points, and the larger the rod end, the higher the break point. So just to give you an idea, 5/8 rod ends are pretty common in the industry on like radius rods and tie rods. We are the only manufacturer that uses 3/4 inch rod ends on our radius rods, which is being the largest means that they're strongest, the hardest to break, they last the longest without wearing out. So a 3/4 inch rod end, for instance, one of the ones that we use is over 100,000 pound pull strength. That means when this is bolted to the chassis and you pull on it until it fails, it requires over 100,000 pounds of force to break this rod end. So next thing is going to be the quality of the rod end, how it's made and how it's actually lubricated. We have size, 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/4. We'll look at these two 3/4 right here. If you guys can see this close enough, I'm not sure, but this one right here is a very, very low quality rod end that has next to no lubrication. It also is very weak. Take a look at the size of the body of the rod end. This being a high quality 100,000 pound pole style rod end. This one having a much narrower body, you can see right here, that doesn't surround the ball as much, this is a weaker system. The pull rate on this is about 20,000 pounds. So you're looking at, 20% of the strength in the actual body itself. Also, the material that these are made of. Now you can see there's a little bit different of a difference in the plating, but not much. They're basically zinc or chromium. But this rod end right here is made of low carbon steel. So it's a base, almost mild steel material this is made of. And this one here is a high carbon steel, 4340 material. The difference between them is massive in strength. I mean, it's the same as you guys building a roll cage out of welded mild steel or building your roll cage out of chromoly. Which one do you want to crash? That's a huge, huge difference. If you run a 5/8 rod end on a set of radius rods for a Polaris or a Can-Am, this also is run in racing, you're going to replace these, or at least half of them, every single race. 250 miles to 500 miles, you're going to replace them, guaranteed. If you ran this crappy style, they'll either be broken in 250 miles, or they're going to be squeaking the second you take it off the trailer. They instantly have problems. So if you want to go one race at a time and buy all new rod ends, go for it. If you want to run a 3/4 like we do, we ran this style of rod end. Here's one right here that we took off the race car. 1 full year, a whole season of racing, 3,500 race miles. This has gone through, and you can see it doesn't have any play in it. It's not rattling, but it is easy to move around because the liner's been beat out of it. Whereas a brand new one, I can't even move it. There's no movement whatsoever in that. So there's a big difference in how long they'll last by going to a larger rod end, and I would suggest going larger to give you the advantages of no squeak and never have to worry about replacing it. We talked about the size. We talked about the differences between how the quality of the rod end. Let me show you one. One of the reasons why you never run these urethane ones. This one's got the liner in it actually. Here you go. Can you see inside here, Chase? You
Yes,
see that this liner used to be red on this side?
Yes.
And can you see that it's completely missing on this side? There's no liner in there whatsoever.
Let's hold it up for the other camera.
Can you see that?
On the GoPro. Even closer. There we go. Oh yeah.
Okay. So you can see the urethane liner is missing on the far side. As soon as that happens, there's no lubrication in this system and they squeak.
Squeak, squeak.
And nobody likes the sound of a Motel 6 on the back of your car when you're driving through the woods. So that's one of the reasons why you don't run these. Instantaneous problem. These are very common in all the radius rods and tie rods and sway bars that are in the market is that one. Because, costing somebody somewhere in the teens, I don't know, 15 to 18 bucks. It's a lot easier to sell products when those costs are down versus having rod ends that cost you $35. But the difference is huge in longevity. Now back to manufacture. So these rod ends, stainless steel ball. This one right here is a low carbon chrome plated rod end. This one right here is a high carbon steel 4340 material, Teflon lined, zinc or basically chromium style plating. This one right here is 5 times stronger than this one that you see right there. And that's just because of the material that's used in the process and heat treating between those two. So you've got size, does make a difference. Bigger rod end, much better. Also, the quality of the rod end makes all the difference. You don't want lower quality stuff. You don't want injection molded stuff. You want Teflon lined, high quality, high carbon, stainless steel combination of rod end manufacturer, heat treating, all kinds of cool things in there. And there's even more that I'm ignoring and not talking about because it would make people's eyes roll in the back of their head and they go to sleep. Should we lubricate them? No. If they're good rod ends, you never do that. That'll actually accelerate the wearing process. Don't do that. Steve?
No one's asked this, but I do get this a lot of the time. Should people use Loctite on the rod end when either it's a lock nut or jam nut, however it is? Should they use Loctite inside of whatever they're putting?
So that's a great question, and here's my answer to that. You do not use Loctite on the threaded portion of the rod end where it's installed in like a radius rod or on a tie rod. But you can use Loctite where the radius rod ends and the jam nut is going to thread on. A little dab right there, and then thread the jam nut over the Loctite and onto the radius rod or rod end. That's a good idea, but I wouldn't recommend it in here because you're going to want to take this thing out of the radius rod at some point and replace it. If it's a race car, you need to know that. If it's a play car, you might never replace it. But I would not Loctite it when you install it.
And anyone coming from here, radius rod or installed, does have anti-seize on it because you do want to run anti-seize.
Yeah, you don't want the threads galling up on aluminum or on chromoly radius rods or whatever it might be. So we actually lubricate the threads. But you can red Loctite the jam nut. How's that? Matt.
Powder coat, yes or no?
Do not powder coat rod ends.